Testing, testing.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Apologies for the delay. We had a few technical problems which we had to resolve. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive. My name's Stephen Conway. I'm the leader of the Council and Executive Member for Housing, Partnerships and the Local Plan, and I will be chairing this meeting. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. If you are participating via Teams, which several people will be this evening, when you're not speaking, please mute your microphones. Please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. We don't have a large audience in the room with us this evening. That's perhaps understandable given the nature of the weather. But for those who are watching online, I should introduce the people you can see on your screen. At the side of the room, and they may not be entirely visible to you, are two of our directors, George Framelico, who's the Director of Place and Growth, and Matt Pope, who's the Executive Director for Adults, Children's and Public Health. We have Priya Patel, who's the lead member for the lead officer for Democratic Services. We have the Chief Executive, Susan Parsonage, and we have the Chief Monitoring Officer and Assistant Director of Governance, Andrew Moulton. So that's the officers who are present this evening. As for the members of the executive, we're rather short on people. Some are joining us online, and I'll ask them, if I may, to introduce themselves first, those who are online to begin with. Jordan, would you like to introduce yourself and explain what your areas of responsibility are?
Hello, good evening all. Just quickly checking everyone hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Grand. My name's John Montgomery. I'm the Executive Member for Environment and Climate Emergency, and my apologies, I could not attend in person this evening. I too have been affected by the weather and I'm stuck in Reading.
Okay, I quite understand. Thank you very much. I know there's not much of a train service at the moment.
Not at all.
Thank you, Jordan. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening. I'm afraid I'm having to attend remotely because I'm not very well and I don't want to infect anybody. So my name is Rachel Bishop-Firth and I'm the Executive Member for Resident Services, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty.
Thank you, Rachel. So we'll come to colleagues who are in the room now. Imogen.
Good evening, I'm Imogen Shepherd-Bay and I'm the Executive Member for Finance and Governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Prue.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Prue Bray. I'm the lead member for Children's Services and Deputy Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Prue. And David.
Good evening. I'm David Hare. I'm the Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing.
Thank you, David. Okay, if we can now, I think, begin with the agenda, and we start with apologies. I know of apologies from Councillor Paul Fishwick and Councillor Mark Ashwell. Paul is the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways, and Mark is the Executive Member for Business and Economic Development, Arts and Culture, Leisure and Sport, I think. His is a very long title. Neither, unfortunately, can be with us this evening. Do we have any other apologies for absence? I think that is everyone covered, so I don't think we do. Okay, so if we can move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Can we just confirm that the minutes of the meeting of the Executive on the 18th of July are accurate and everyone's content to agree them? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's all of those who were able to vote. I should just add, for the sake of anyone watching, members of the Executive who aren't able to be here in person can speak and contribute, but they can't vote. Voting is only allowed for people who are here in person. So I'll sign those minutes. I'll pass them back to Andrew to pass along. Thank you. If we can now move to item 20 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Prue, you can start.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm declaring an interest in item 27, which is the shareholders report, because I'm a director of WBC Holdings.
I need to make the same declaration on the same item. I'm also a director of Wokingham Borough Council Holdings. David?
And I've got to make the same item because I'm a director of Optalis.
Thank you, David. Okay. If we can then now move on to the next item on the agenda, that's statement from the leader. Last week, Council approved the new local plan for publication and consultation. In my speech introducing the plan, I mentioned the key contribution played by many people in the organisation, but the bulk of my comments were necessarily devoted to the plan itself, the method of assessing sites, the new policies, and the reasons why the best interests of the borough were served by approving the plan. I want to take this opportunity to thank more fully the council officers in the planning department and other areas of the council for their dedicated efforts over many years. Our planning professionals were obviously the key personnel. They undertook the painstaking technical assessments and evidence gathering for the sites selected and the policies proposed. But we should not forget the part played by officers in other parts of the council, such as highways and school place planning. We are very fortunate in Wokingham to have such high-quality officers. They are indeed our greatest asset. And I'm sure I speak for the whole executive when I thank them all for their work. I want also to thank my predecessors as executive members responsible for planning and the local plan. Most recently, Lindsay Ferris undertook a thorough review of the sites in the draft plan he had inherited. And once it was clear that Loddon Valley Hall Farm was the best in technical terms, with fewer disadvantages and greater opportunities than the other major site options, he led the negotiations with the Loddon Valley Hall Farm landowners to improve the quality of the proposal and secure a reduction in numbers while retaining the required infrastructure. He also began the work on developing or extending new policies to go in the plan. An even bigger contribution was made by Lindsay's Conservative predecessor, Wayne Smith. Wayne laid the foundations for the current plan in the previous administration's second draft plan, or revised growth strategy, which identified almost all the sites for new housing, including the principal site of Loddon Valley Hall Farm. The new local plan, in short, is the product of a lot of hard work by a lot of people over many years. Whatever some may claim, in the hope of capitalising on the inevitable dismay of residents about development in their vicinity, the truth is that the plan approved last Thursday is the fruit of work by professional experts and by two different political administrations. It should be understood in that corporate and cross-party context. Thank you. We now move on to public question time, item 22 in our agenda, and I think we have a question from Abigail Treadwell Collins, who was going to be asking the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways her question. Abigail's not able to be with us this evening, but I understand she's asked someone else, another resident, to ask the question on her behalf. I'm not sure who that other person is, so apologies if I haven't named you. Okay. Well, because there may be some interest in the question, I think I should read out the question, and I'm going to read out the response I would have given. That's not strictly necessary under the terms of the Constitution, but I think it's only fair if somebody has submitted a question and would have liked it answered, that they get an answer. So Abigail would have asked Paul, the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways, her question. In Paul's absence, I'll be answering the question. And what she asks is, when will permits be introduced to Brook Street? They seem to be constantly delayed and the problem seems to be getting worse. Brook Street, incidentally, is in Twyford. And my answer is, thank you for your question, Abigail. I understand your frustration, as a long time has elapsed since the first request for a residents-only parking scheme. That long period, however, does reflect the special challenges of Brook Street and the difficulty of finding a solution that commands general support. A significant obstacle to the introduction of a new permit scheme in the street is the number of permits that each household would be entitled to. The amount of available road space on the street means we have to be mindful of the need to avoid potential demand significantly exceeding the available capacity. The current policy is that for new permit schemes, only one permit per property would be issued. This was what was proposed to Brook Street residents in 2023 in an initial consultation. That initial consultation produced a significant number of objections, which is why officers have been obliged to consider further options. I met with Highways officers recently, and the residents have been informally asked their views on two possible options. The responses to that informal consultation will soon be with Highways officers. I should say that whatever scheme is pursued, a legal process will have to be completed called a traffic regulation order, which involves a further statutory consultation. The whole process takes many months to complete, so I'm afraid I can't offer an immediate solution to the problems experienced by Brook Street residents. I hope, however, that we can find a consensus on the best way forward that makes it easier for Brook Street residents to park near their homes. Thank you. Now, as there's no one here to ask a supplementary, that I think is the end of the public questions in our agenda. Priya, have there been any member questions submitted?
We haven't had any member questions.
No, there are no member questions. So we'll move straight on to the matters for consideration on the agenda, and we start with item 24 on page 13 of your agenda, and this is the Community Vision 2035. When we began work on a community vision for Wokingham Borough nearly 2 years ago, I never dared to hope we'd be so successful at engaging so many committed and enthusiastic people. The concept of a community vision, which sets out the aspirations of the borough for the years ahead, was launched at a well-attended meeting at Wokingham Town Hall. It was followed by a series of productive workshops with the voluntary and charitable sector, town and parish councils and businesses, and 2 forum sessions with a wider range of participants, including the probation service, the Chamber of Commerce, health providers, the fire service and police, faith groups, educators, including the University of Reading and local schools, and the Youth Council. All have been involved as equal partners with the Borough Council, and the enthusiasm to participate on that basis has come across strongly. A steering group was formed to carry forward the work on the community vision. The steering group includes representatives from business, the charitable sector, health providers, faith groups, the Youth Council, Reading University, and council officers. The chair is Nick Fellows of the Wokingham Volunteer Centre, and I've tried to attend every meeting I could. I'm enormously grateful to all members of the steering group for their time and commitment over many months. I include in my thanks our excellent officers who have supported the steering group's work. I also want to record my gratitude to those residents and businesses who responded to our recent consultation on the draft community vision that we produced earlier this year. The level of approval of the broad objectives is very pleasing. Co-authored by a great range of community groups working alongside the council, the vision aims to capture the hopes and aspirations of different parts of the community. It will influence the council's direction of travel over the next decade and more. We hope formally to adopt the community vision at the next full council meeting. I see it as the fruit of a new and radical approach to how the council serves its residents and businesses. In the past, the council has consulted on its strategies and plans after they've been formed. Our ambition now is for a less top-down and more bottom-up method of engaging the community, where the broad priorities are shaped by the people who live and work in the borough. There will be periodic refreshes in the years ahead to make sure the council is still heading in the direction that the community wants. Rarely do councils initiate a process and then facilitate others taking the lead. We have sought to call on the energy, enthusiasm, experience and knowledge within our community. The community vision and the process by which it's been drawn up reflects a new commitment to empowering people to help shape the future. And you can see the enthusiasm and commitment of the steering group members in the endorsements they provided on page 32 of your agenda. And some of them are really well they're all well worth reading. This is right at the end of the community vision document itself. And it's very, very striking, the range of different participants and their perspective on this process. So, are there any questions or comments anyone wants to make in relation to the community vision? Prue, I can see you're about to say something.
Only to say it's really pleasing to see this, and it's been really developed with the support of the community everywhere across the community, and I'm looking forward to see it influencing us as we go forward.
Thank you, Prue. I think it is a great example of a partnership working at its best. So if there are no other comments or no questions, can I ask that we move... Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. I wasn't looking sufficiently at the screen to realise you were there. So sorry. Please ask your question or make your point.
I was just going to say how pleased I was by two things. First of all, by the Vision's commitment to the inclusion of all of our residents, regardless of their age, or their background, or their circumstances. And secondly, how pleased I am that it captures our ambition to end poverty in the borough. I think it's a fantastic piece of work, and the number of contributors is great.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's a really good point. Well made. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, can we move to the recommendation on page 13? Well, it actually goes on to page 14. We're supposed to, I think, note the ambitions of local people within the Community Vision 2035, support adoption of the Community Vision 2035, using it to inform strategic planning and service delivery for the Council, and support the Council's commitment to continue collaborating with partners and the local community in delivery of the vision. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. And we'll now move on to our next item. That's on item 25, Wokingham Borough School Places Strategy 2024-25 to 2029-30. This starts on page 43 of your agenda. And Prue, I think you're presenting this.
Yes, I am. And I'm going to speak at rather greater length than I normally would when introducing an item, because this is really quite important. So this strategy is the first step towards making sure that we are catering for the right number of school places in the borough. Predicting school places is complicated. The council's tried to do it in the past, but without the benefit of the kinds of data and tools that are now available. And we have more confidence in our figures now due to the more sophisticated methods we've used to analyse and understand the data. But even so, the figures should still be taken as representing a trend rather than as being accurate to the last decimal point. So, in general terms, where we are is that the birth rate has been falling on the one hand, whereas on the other, partly due to house building and partly due to inward migration, the population of the borough has been increasing. And this has resulted in us being in a position where we have a bulge in the number of children, and that bulge is currently working its way through secondary and the last years of primary. So the number of children coming into primary at the reception end is considerably fewer, and that's not evenly spread around the borough. So what are the implications of this? Well, firstly, that with fewer younger children overall, we think our early years, which is the preschool and nursery provision, is broadly adequate for the time being. And at the other end, we have already taken the steps necessary to create space in our secondary schools for the years with higher numbers of children. And you can see that reflected in the table which shows secondary school place availability, which is on page 67. So we want all children in Wokingham to be attending good schools that support them in their ambitions for the future. And schools tend to thrive when they're supported by their local communities. So while talking about secondary, I do need to acknowledge the concerns that have been expressed about the performance of Oakbank. Some parents have not been choosing this school because of these concerns. So the council is doing all we can to try to support the school, but as it's part of a multi-academy trust, we have no direct powers over it. And I think it is also worth acknowledging that if all parents from the Shinfield parish area were choosing to send their children to Oakbank, it would not have the capacity that was sufficient to meet that area's secondary school need. And I can't promise an immediate fix to all that, but it is being taken into account in our long-term secondary school place planning. Post-16 education is connected, but it's almost a separate issue. We have sixth forms, which mainly offer a traditional A-level route for young people, not entirely, but mainly. But we have no further education colleges of our own, and in particular, our offering for young people with SEND post-16 is not great. We are looking at all of that, and as you will see on page 53, the aim is to update this strategy and our plan annually, and for future iterations to include not just refreshed forecasts, but to integrate SEND provision into the same strategy. Now, having said all that, that leaves primary. So, in broad terms, we have just about enough capacity for Key Stage 2, which is what we used to call juniors, but too much capacity in Key Stage 1, which used to be called infants. But the picture is far from uniform across the borough. And I think it's quite important to remember that with primaries, unlike secondaries, there is an expectation that schools are generally within walking distance of people's homes. So primary schools need to be looked at by geographical area more closely. Now, as with secondary, The position is that the most strain on places is in the southwest of the borough, which is roughly speaking the Arborfield and Shinfield strategic development locations, but including Swallowfield. And in that area, there are too few primary places. That's why the strategy on page 63 shows that we will be looking at taking steps to provide extra places to serve that area. And this is laid out in more detail in Appendix 1 of the strategy. Now, turning to the other parts of the borough, the tables in the strategy show that over the next few years, there are going to be too few Key Stage 2 places in Early, Woodley and the eastern part of Wokingham Town, but roughly the right number in the rest of the borough. But at Key Stage 1, there are considerable surplus places everywhere from now onwards. And in fact, our primary schools are already experiencing those surpluses. And I should say we're not alone. This is happening across the country. And this is a problem for primary schools because they're largely funded on a per pupil basis. The size of primary classes is generally set at 30. And if you have a two-form entry school, which in other words you have space for 60 pupils a year, then if there aren't enough pupils to spread around and you only get 50 instead of 60, for example, you still have to have two forms and two teachers, but you've lost a sixth of the money that paid those teachers. School budgets are already very tight, and let me remind you, I think we're the third lowest funded education area in England, and our schools simply will struggle to absorb this extra budget pressure. So we need to move ahead as quickly as possible to resolve this. This is not something the council can or should do by itself. We need to work with our primaries, whether they're maintained schools or academies, on a borough-wide basis. And we want to make sure that there are a number of principles we operate with this, that we relieve the pressure on schools, that we continue to have enough places overall, that we make decisions collectively about what is in the best interests of our local education system in terms of where and how we reduce the surplus capacity, that we work to make sure that all schools are treated fairly in this process, and that we avoid making short-term decisions which prejudice the ability of schools to respond to future increases in pupil numbers in the long term. So finally, can I say, this paper is really setting the strategic direction, and it's the action planning that will arise from it, which will have all the detail. We took this strategy to the Education Partnership earlier this week, and they are very keen for us to get on with the action plans. And I think so am I. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Prue. That was a very comprehensive context within which to understand the report, and I'm very pleased you drew attention at the end of what you said to the action plans that will contain the details of how the strategy is going to be delivered. This is obviously a tricky issue, and it will need to be handled, as you say, with care and including all of the players that need to be included in this process. So thank you very much for that, and thank you to you and to the officers in children's services, and particularly in school place planning, for the work they've done on this. Are there any questions? If there aren't any questions, I think we can go to the recommendation on page 43, which is that the executive determines that the attached draft Wokingham Borough School Places strategy is adopted as the borough's plan in respect of school place sufficiency in the area, and that a further report shall be brought to executive to confirm the council's commitment to additional primary school capacity in the Shinfield area if this is deemed necessary in 2025. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you. And that's everyone. So we move on. Thank you very much, Prue. And now we move to item 26 on your agenda. This is disability bus passes. It's on starts on page 79. Now, this ordinarily would have been presented or introduced to the executive by Paul Fishwick, but we know Paul is ill, so I've asked David Hare, who's the executive member for adult services, to introduce this item. And that's very fitting, given that the recommendation really is based on work that David and his colleagues have been doing with users of this service, and that's, I think we've got a very strong sense from Social Care Futures, which is, David will tell you a little bit about in a minute, how important this is. And so I'm very happy for David to do the introduction.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I've been lobbied quite a bit by people who want to be able to travel at decent times rather than just out of rush hour, and people with disabilities. And Social Care Futures is something that we took on board back in, was it January, and that's something that is basically listening to and working with people with disabilities, helping them to have the things that they need and the things that they want as far as possible. Obviously that's within financial constraints, but we're listening to them rather than just doing for them. And I think that's the vital thing, that we're listening to them. And certainly this is listening to people especially with disabilities who want to go to work but can't, because you can't get a bus for nothing. Well, your bus pass doesn't cover you until after 9:30 and things like that. So it is making sure that we are listening to them and we're doing what they have asked us to do. And as I said, I've been lobbied by quite a few people, one in particular, but quite some others as well, about how important this is. And something that I feel very strongly about is that it gives more independence to people with disabilities, people who find that often they are shut in because they don't have the freedom to go to work, to go to training, to get out to activities when they want to, in the early morning or later in the day. So I think it's important for them to have this given to them so that we are making an equal playing field for them to get perhaps temporary work at Christmas, perhaps more permanent work. And some will only be able to work 2 or 3 days a week. But if they can get to work at a reasonable hour, that is very positive. So it's something that I've lobbied for as well, and I'm very pleased to see it coming on board.
Thank you very much, David. I mean, the report contains, just to be clear, 2 options. The first option is do nothing, keep things as they are, and the second option is remove all time restrictions for the use of disabled and disabled plus companion passes on all qualifying bus services. Now, are there any questions? I think this is, if I can put it in these terms, a very good news item. This is helping members of our community who will really gain some material benefit from this change. So I'm hoping that we're all very much in support of it. But are there any questions or observations? I don't see any. Oh, Prue, you wanted to say something?
This is a very good thing and we should do it. It's a relatively small amount of money and it can make a lot of difference.
Yes, that point about it being a relatively small amount of money is absolutely correct. I'm glad I'm saying this without the Chief Finance Officer present, but it is a modest amount of money and it will bring a very significant benefit to our residents. So it is money that I think is well spent. So the recommendation on page 79 of your agenda is first recommendation, approve option 2, which, as I've just said, is the removing the time restrictions for the use of disabled and disabled plus companion passes and all qualifying bus services under the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme. And the second recommendation we're asked to approve is approve a supplementary estimate of £6,000 for 2024-25. I note an ongoing budget growth requirement of £15,000 to be included in the February 2025 medium-term financial plan submission for 2025-26 onwards. So can I see all those in favour? Thank you. That's everyone again. That I think will be really welcomed by many members of our disabled members within our community. So we now move on to item 27 on the agenda. This is the Shareholders Report 2023-24 outturn, and I'm going to ask Imogen, as Executive Member for Finance and Governance, to introduce this report. Imogen.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, this report is very much reduced from previous years because in our council meeting on the 21st of March, it was agreed that we should set up a separate shareholders committee to form oversight of our housing companies. These arrangements, including replacing councillors as non-executive directors on these companies, and expected to improve the transparency around how these companies are run by bringing more of their information into a public meeting. The first meeting of that committee it will be held in November, and after that the financial information from the housing companies will be brought back to this committee. However, right now we still have Optilis, our adult social care company, which is being reported here, and I draw your attention to what it says about our new care home, Bluebell House, which is being bought online and transforming the lives of our residents living here. It is not yet at full occupancy, and its financial costs will improve as that occupancy increases when more people are able to move in. But of course, Optilis don't just look after older residents, they're also helping us support younger people and transitioning from adulthood to adulthood, and adults in supported residential accommodation. The main financial challenges that Optilis has really been around finding and keeping staff, which is a national issue for the care industry. Optilis has had to use agency staff to keep safe service levels, but has been slowly improving, and agency staff are being replaced by permanent staff. I'm pretty sure David might want to say something about this report as well. So
I think you're almost certainly right.
Yeah, I shall leave it with that then.
Thank you, Imogen. David, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I just think that Imogen was saying our problem has been keeping and staff, and certainly that's something that, because we have raised the pay rate to a reasonable level, we're keeping staff because of that, and that's very positive. And okay, you think, oh golly, they put up the pay right, that's costing more, but it's still a lot less than having agency in, and so that's the positive point of that.
Thank you very much, David. And I'm grateful, Imogen, to you for mentioning or highlighting, more than mentioning, highlighting the importance of Bluebell House, which is another, I think, success story for the council in recent times. It's been a really good decision to purchase Bluebell House and bring it forward as part of the council's offering to help with care for those who need it. So this is, again, a really, I think, a very positive story. So can I ask you if there are no other points anyone wishes to make or questions? And I don't see any, either here or online. We'll go to the recommendation, and the executive is asked to note, 1, the new governance arrangements for the housing companies and the impact on the reporting of the final financial and operating position for 23-24 financial year, and 2, the Optalis financial and operational position for 2023-24 financial year. So those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Okay, we move on to our final item on the agenda, and this is item 28, and this is the Health and Safety Annual Report. And I'm going to ask Rachel Bishop-Firth, who's with us online, rather nobly, given that she's not very well, to introduce this report. So Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So I'm very pleased to be bringing this report to the executive. The council is committed to protecting the safety of our workforce and the residents who use our services. I'm very pleased that the recent audit carried out by the British Safety Council of our health and safety management noted our active leadership, the engagement of staff, and the genuine desire right across the council to continually improve safety. They gave a number of recommendations for how we can improve, and these are going to be prioritised and actioned over the coming months. During the past year, the council carried out a health and safety assurance programme for our schools, worked to improve engagement with staff on health and safety issues, especially around encouraging reporting of incidents and near misses, started work to improve the safety of lone workers, and promoted workstation assessments to prevent musculoskeletal problems. The health and safety team are building a stronger health and safety culture among our staff. We continually improve by identifying and mitigating risks at an early stage. This report shows an increase in incidents and near misses in the past year. Now, we're never going to be complacent about these increases, but our health and safety experts have concluded that the increase is related to the work that they've been doing to encourage reporting. So in other words, it's an increase in the number of incidents which are being reported rather than underlying incidents. So in schools where the number of incidents reported decreased, the health and safety team probed and they found that not all incidents were being reported. So they've been working to support school staff to ensure that there's full awareness of how to report incidents and near misses. There were 8 cases in the past year where an incident was serious enough to be reported to a health and safety executive. Only one of those incidents involved a council employee. A number of these were minor incidents, such as a sprained ankle, which had to be reported because of the length of employee absence which followed. There were also 2 notices of contravention issued to us. These have now been rectified, reviewed and closed by the HSE. Reported incidents of verbal abuse have continued to rise, with 29 reports in the past year. We believe that this increase is again due to better reporting. The council will be launching a programme in October which will help to support staff in this area. And there were very sadly 2 incidents in this period where members of the public assaulted council staff who were doing their jobs. This is, of course, absolutely unacceptable, and both incidents were referred to Thames Valley Police. We've identified actions to be taken to reduce the risk of assault occurring in the future. And finally, there's a small typo on page 7 of this report where the reference to 2023 to 24 should read the programme for the coming year. So I'd like to thank officers for this report and also thank every member of staff who's contributed to making the council a better place to work, to visit and to learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel, for introducing that. It's very sad that there continue to be incidents of verbal abuse, and even more concerning that there have been examples of assault on staff members by members of the public. I think we would all wish to condemn that and do everything we can to avoid that happening in the future. I think you made a very good point about how when one tries to tackle a problem and investigate thoroughly the nature of a problem and encourage people to report instances, that can lead to a spike in reporting that gives the impression of a background rise in the number of incidents, which of course may well not be the case. It may be that all you're doing is uncovering things that in the past have not been reported. But thank you very much for that report. Are there any questions or comments anyone wishes to make? No, I think not. So thank you very much, Rachel. We're going to go to the recommendation, which is that the executive notes the internal health and safety performance for 2023-24 and the priorities in the report which have informed the action plan for 2024-25 and will shape the action plan for the next municipal year. So we are asked to note that, and I hope we can do so now. Yep, that's great. Thank you very much, everyone. And that, I believe, closes the meeting. Thank you very much.